CxO Game Show. You're in for a treat. Can I welcome the contestants to the front, please? Let's welcome, give Marianne a hand. No seats, we're not going to get comfortable, okay? You will deserve a seat later on. This is a horn for you. Can I welcome John to the front? And Jeff as well. Thank you. And that's for you.
I feel like we need to do a test run.
Yeah, no.
This works.
You realise I only came for this.
We're all not going to be taking seats this time around. We're going to stand at the front.
All right.
Yes. 2 meters between both of you. Yes.
Oh my God, what is this happening here?
I know, right? Okay. This is the game show, and this is what we've been promising you. It's going to be fun. It's going to be something different. And only after they finish being on a hot seat, or rather on a hot stage, then they will be able to take a seat. And we can address some really interesting questions. But for now, let me just have a look at who's here. Okay, we have John Panista, who's joined us here today. He's the CIO of West Financial Health Insurance. Give him a hand. Oh, there you go, Jack.
Practice
we have
one.
the lovely lady in the middle, Marianne Mitchell, who's the Chief Information Security Officer at AGL. Thank you. She's also done Australia proud because she just won the overall winner at the ASA conference for the Security Professional Award. So well done, Marianne. We're also happy for you.
Thank you, thank you.
And last but not least, we have Jeff MacArthur, who's the Chief Risk Officer at Greater Bank. And I'm your host for today, so my name is Shamane, and you all know I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Sekuro, and we've prepared some really controversial questions that we're going to get this brave, very brave CxOs to address this. And I have not seen anyone brave enough to address it as it is before, so we're doing it live on the stage. Thank you very much. Let me go to question. All right, the rule of this game is that they have to sound their horn if they disagree with a statement and they have strong feelings about this, okay? So, the very first statement, the CISO should report to the CIO. All right, so Jack, he beat everything.
No, they should report to the CFO.
Oh God, for sake. No, not at all. So. No, I think, hey, it could work different ways, but the CFO should be the best person for CISO to report to. It's shouldn't be all, security shouldn't be all about the money. I think it's either a risk matter or a convergent security model with physical security. That's the best place for it, and reporting directly either to CEO would be my approach.
Ooh. Very, very good. John, you're silent. Do you have anything to say about this?
Well, actually, controversially, so at the moment, my ISO actually reports into me, so it's a bit hard for me to disagree. But I will say this, that I think as cybersecurity has matured over the last couple of years, might have been a good place to be 3 years ago. Now I think we all understand cybersecurity is an all-business problem, and I think it needs dedicated resources at the C-level suite, having that independent view into the board. A lot of the controls are sitting in IT. You need that independent view coming in from the outside to make sure that we're doing the right things as well.
Excellent. There you go. We have CIO advocating for this.
I like that. Like it's security becomes a much more complex and broad topic than just technology and addressing all the organizations. So that's good.
Excellent. And well, let's go on to the I do have lots of thoughts about this statement, but I think it really does depend on the CxO who's running it, right? And if they're supportive of cybersecurity, who you report into doesn't, it really depends on the organization, the structure as well. All right, next statement. When the board says they have zero appetite for critical cyber risk, the best thing to do and to respond is to give them dry sarcasm.
Oh gosh, we're all going to agree on this, aren't we?
I agree, yeah. Just say...
Any comments, feel free to sound your horn, whether you disagree or you agree.
So I agree, and I think we could just say, let's close up shop and bury the servers.
But that's what you really do. Okay, Jeff, any comment?
This is the fascinating one, because the board is always mandated to say it's got a zero appetite, hasn't it? But in some respects, whilst it might be true there's an element of dry sarcasm, or maybe giggling a little bit, in all seriousness, and I've got a text from my Chief Compliance Officer to remind me to state, my views today are my own. We're in the context of Controversial Gameshow, they're not representative of the bank.
Yes, he's representing himself, not the bank.
Or the board. Sorry, to the board who are out there. I'm not talking about you guys. But yes, I mean, in all seriousness, you'd expect them to have a zero appetite. But the fascinating for me is when you translate that into investment and controls. And I think one of you asked about getting the board on board. On board? That wasn't intentional. I actually don't have a problem with getting the board interested in cyber risk. What you don't have to do is actually unpack, well, how are you going to get to a zero appetite? And I think one of the early speakers was talking about controls. Gosh, you guys know better than I do that the amount of controls that's required to get to zero is pretty substantial.
Thanks, Jeff. Can you put your mic on? And we will give a chance later to the board to comment, because we have some of them in the house sitting there and having lots of opinions, so they will have a chance to come back on this. Okay, we're going to move on to the next statement. Are we happy?
Yep, let's go.
Good stuff. All right, security is the last thing on the CIO or the CTO's mind. Go for it, John.
So, for me, I think it's just 100% our focus at the moment, especially like this week. You've seen, I won't talk about Medibank, I think, other than what's in the public arena. But, this is a constant thing for me for the last 3 years. We're never green. You know what I mean? You're always fighting, with spend to the boards, getting the people, getting the organisation to come on board to understand what's happening, having conversations, difficult conversations sometimes with the marketing guys. They want to do this fantastic bit of information, get this fantastic information out of our systems. But when you apply the security lens on top of it, and you say to them, look, do you actually really need that information? Do you actually really need that data? What controls are you going to put in place to protect that information if it gets hacked or secured? And, it's just never ending, for us.
Really good, a switched on CIO. And there you go, people have been talking about the natural tension between the CIO and the CISO, but if they get each other, they can be a really powerful team. Mariam, do you want to comment on that?
So I agree with John. So obviously it's not the last thing on the CIO and CTO's mind. I report to a CTO myself, and it's a big, I would say, it's a big focus for the CTO. That being said, the technology also has a lot of moving parts, and we are at the age that there's a big technology transformations that are happening, and sometimes reporting to the same team kind of takes the independence out of it, and you might just get deprioritized with the technology stream as well. So it's about keeping that balance on what works, obviously, but definitely not the last thing on the mind. So I think it has, again, especially given the recent year that we are having. So
excellent. Well, we'll be going to the next statement. The CRO doesn't understand technology.
I think it's a good thing that most of the CROs that I've actually met actually do understand technology. So when I talk to them,
did you notice how he looked at me then?
Yeah, I did. And I think it's important for a CRO to actually understand technology. It's a critical thing. It's a critical risk on everyone's minds, especially the boards. So, yeah.
What about you, Jeff? Do you understand technology?
I have no idea. I've still got a Nokia phone. That's where the text came from compliance, right?
yeah.
In all fairness, I mean, obviously I'm a crow for a bank, so you'd imagine, one of my key areas is money in, money out, because that's what banking is. But me personally, I probably migrated to technology and digital 15, 16 years ago, so I'd like to think I'm special. I'm sure that's what my mum says. So, yeah, I mean, I have migrated to technology. And going back to the question earlier, I had a CTO 10 or 11 years ago who said to me, when I was kind of getting into risk, and particularly from a technology perspective, he kept telling me, It's when, Jeff, not if. And this was from a CTO 10 years ago. Now, whether that was just incredibly hindsight or you guys all knew that and it was news to me, I don't know. Maybe that demonstrates my ignorance of technology.
CFOs, well, we can't leave them untouched, right, since we're going through the CFO suite. So CFOs are stingy. Good luck with getting money out of the wallet. Is there any CFOs here? Sorry.
My CFO is incredibly generous. That's to the camera.
Yeah, I'm also just going to sound the horn for my CFO. So look, I think it's not the case anymore, and I think the cyber risk is becoming just so very apparent, so very topical that they are opening the wallets and loosening the strings. But I think they're also keeping us honest and making sure that the value and the risk and the value to the business is very well articulated. I always say, and it's something that my CFO absolutely loves me, is that you shouldn't put a $100 lock on a $10 bike. So the solution has to fit the problem, and we don't want to overkill and just go buy everything and stop the business. So it has to make sense. We have to know what we are protecting, why are we protecting it, and how are we protecting it to the best way that makes sense. So, yeah.
Oh, I love the analogy. Later we will go into that.
Can I add to that as well? Yes. I think also it's also about understanding that when proposals go to business case to actually go to approval and so forth, it's understanding that security is actually built into that entire cycle. That it's not that, hey, we've decided on this technology, hey, let's go get a quote for security to sit down and put on top of it. It's understanding that it's at the entire life cycle of that proposal phase. And when that's done well, CFOs usually don't question it.
Yes.
But I know in other organisations that's a difficult thing to happen. You know, security is always the last thing people think about. So.
And it's also about like speaking, the earlier panel talked about speaking their language as well. So one of the CISOs were telling me how he managed to get buy-in from the CFO is the CFO was asking him like, why do we need so many security tools, you know, the different firewalls and things like that. And then the CISO just asked him, well, since you're a CFO, you're talking about diversifying your portfolio, your investments and all that. That's very important, right? So similar to that way, in terms of your strategy, we also have to do the same thing. And actually that got to him. So it's just about being able to align that language to them. But next one, okay, the CISO is boiling. Whoa, they didn't have time to read it. CISO is boiling the ocean and can't see the bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely not true. I think might have been the case 10 years ago, but look, see that at the grown-up table comes the responsibility and understanding the business and why we're doing things the way we need to do, and all that it's not about cyber strategy, it's about business resilience strategy, right? So I think I think lots of cyber leaders in this room would agree with me that we are seeing the bigger picture. We want to protect the business, and it's not about just building a tower or because we like the security, and for the security for the sake of security doesn't make sense.
Well done, Mariam, speaking on behalf of all the CISOs and cyber leaders here, representing them very well. Both of you, if anything. Is
this where I get to be controversial, or am I going to get stoned? No. Look, I don't disagree. I think one of the challenges is how do you tell the big picture? Because often the appearance is there is the boiling of the ocean. Because of course, as passionate people, I'm a passionate risk nerd, so I can get very carried away with a whole bunch of detail and risk. And then when I'm talking to the board, they just want to know, tell me the big picture, tell me the sum of the parts, not all the detail. So I think that's where sometimes there can be elements of truth. Do I sit down? No, do I? But my counsel is always, it is about, you can see the big picture, you just got to articulate it.
Excellent. Well, you guys have passed this important phase and you've done well on this hot stage. So with that, you have earned a seat. Wait, do we have a stool instead? Where's Nick?
Stool?
Is that really? Yeah. I know you want to be comfortable, all right. But we're going to make sure you are elevated so everyone can see you. Yes, so we need 3 stools, please.
We need 3 stools.
Okay.
I was going to sit down.
Put the feet up, you know.
I thought I was finished.
I know. Okay, we're gonna get comfortable. Yes, please. This is for the benefit of people at the back, so you can see the rest of us. All right, so we're going to dive into now. Let's hear a bit, right, from the CxO panel. Thank you so much, everyone. We're going to talk a bit about the analogies, right? I think, Mariam, you mentioned some really good analogies as well. So if we can share with the rest of the audience here, what are some analogies you've used to help you gain better business understanding of security, or just help you have more effective communication with the different stakeholders?
I might just jump back on the bicycle thing. That's my favorite analogy. I had a whole presentation on that once because I think it makes sense. And a lot of times I tell people, look, when you buy a bike, how many of you just think about the lock that you have to also buy, right? The way I try to explain it is that the common denominator is that you have to spend 20% of the budget of your bicycle on a lock, right? But then also, like, you have to think, am I buying a bike for pleasure, or is it a sentimental value to me? What would happen if actually the bike got stolen? So you have to think about the impact, the replacement of it, right? All that things that you have to go. So actually, that's a very good analogy. I could talk hours on it. And the way that, because if it's stolen, you lose the bike, but you also lose the lock, but you also lose time, effort, recovery, etc. Yeah. And you lose business because maybe that was your mode of transportation to your work. So that's all those things to consider. And then, does even actually a lock is the best way? Maybe insurance is the best way, or maybe putting it in a locked facility is the best way. So there are multiple things to think about. So, and I think by saying that as well, like, you cannot also just, for example, take the wheels of the bike away to secure the bike, because then you take the functionality away. So that's something that I tell to my team, that when we are thinking about the ways to secure the business, we shouldn't take the functionality, because that has to still run. So we are there to help ensure that business runs, and that business is running at its best potential and most accessible, and can accelerate, can innovate, can do all the things that they want, but also protect it. So yeah, I have been getting good reviews on that analogy.
I like the analogy. That's a really helpful way to break it down to people as well. Jeff, John, any stories to share?
Oh, gosh, mine was going to be a car one, but I have my thunder stolen. Similar kind of concept in terms of the car and the alarm, and you don't leave the windows open and door open. Some of you might have seen I don't remember who the advert is for, but you've seen the TV advert about the guy walking out and he locks the door and then he puts the keys on the doorstep and wanders off, So, things like that tell a very powerful story that, security isn't just about closing the door if you haven't locked it, or if you haven't put an alarm on, if the window's open, etc. So, don't get me started on analogies. I think I was doing one on aeroplanes yesterday, so I won't go down that, because that's another 10-minute story.
Another good car one is that the security is like the Branson. Sorry, I just know the German word for it now.
Okay, come back to
yeah, I come back to it.
John, you can rescue.
So I haven't used the car analogy, but I've used a house analogy that everyone gets up in the morning, you sit down, you lock your house, you walk out, and you hope for the best that no one's going to sit down and hack in. And, and we do that, every day of our lives. Something else Nick, I think, is going to speak a bit later, reminded me of today as well, is around, what is cybersecurity for a board? And, there's huge analogies. I think it's almost mirrored between WH&S, the way the board manages WH&S, and cybersecurity, information security. And I heard that presented to me, I think, 4 or 5 years ago from the AICD. And, when cybersecurity for board and for directors was very much new for them. And I think that's also a very good analogy, because when I have those conversations with the board, they still don't understand the terminology, but they definitely do understand WH&S because they've been doing it for so long. If you think that a trip hazard in a stairwell you know, in a particular location. Well, you can do that same analogy back to IT. You know, if you don't sit down and do these particular things, you don't tick these checkboxes, well, bad things can happen. So.
Mario, have you thought of your analogy?
Look, I remember the clutch and the accelerator, but what is the third one? The brake, thank you.
The important one, you know.
Yeah, the important one.
That says something, doesn't it? Oh, who needs a brake?
I just know the other two. So yeah, so it's the best brake. So they say the fastest cars have the best brakes. So yeah, that was the analogy, the good one that you can use.
It's interesting. That's one of the analogies I use for good risk management. You know, when people say that risk is about the handbrake to happiness, have you ever heard that? You know, my counter is good risk management is if you've got really good brakes, you can go faster. It depends what the handling is like, but anyway.
Okay. All right. Now, this is a real challenge for a lot of people. Now, what happens if the business comes to you and tell you, I need this system and I need it today, not tomorrow, but today. Now, how do you go about to manage that expectation with the business?
I tell them, go to the CTO, he'll get it done for you, or she'll get it done for you.
So you're describing my everyday. So it's just like every day happening. Look, everything is important. Everything had to be done yesterday, and
how do you bring in security then?
That's right. This? And unfortunately, in lots of cases, it's the last consideration before they go live, which is not pretty. And look, we do. It's always a risk-based assessment to see can they go live actually with the current situation they're on, and really try to make sure that they understand the risks and the impacts. And I think another thing would be just culture change and having that awareness that it shouldn't be the last thing. You should have just involved from the project requirement phase and design phase. So, yeah.
John?
Working on it.
Yeah, I think it's always like the business comes to you, look, we've got a business requirement, we've got this thing. Sometimes it's, you you hear stories that they've already signed agreements and contracts and spent money and those sorts of things, those bad things that happen in IT that, people don't talk about. And I think for me, it's about having that good relationship on the C-suite and the executive to sit down and to have those conversations and be clear about what your needs are from a technology perspective and say, look, have you considered what the data flow requirements are? What are the data requirements for this thing? What systems are they going to impact? Going back to enterprise architecture, understanding that, okay, we need this system updated, that system updated, that system updated. What's the impact? What's the risks associated with that? And then have a really good working relationship with the CRO to say, okay, so you're either going to accept this system with these particular risks or you're not. Is that within risk appetite? All those conversations need to flow through. And it's got to be at the C-suite. It's got to come from the top down.
Correct. And a lot of time what happens is that they say, oh, we just accept the risk. And it's like, is it your risk to accept?
Yeah, that's
right.
I
think,
exactly.
So a lot of times the technology people, they're just we accept that risk, that's okay. But no, that's a business risk. And it has to be accepted within the risk appetite at the right level. And that's, I think, really critical. And where a lot of that the time the risk management process fails, and because the risk is not explained and understood and accepted at the right level.
Yeah.
This might appear as if it was prepared, but it wasn't. It's like what they said.
Well, it's one of those rare times where you actually have the CRO, CISO, and CIO on the stage, right? So let's talk about, because there's a lot of natural tension sometimes, in working with different stakeholders, they all have different motivations, different goals. So can you share some stories about maybe some challenges that you have had faced in engaging with the other execs? But how did you overcome that? Because I think that would be really helpful for people in the room. We're all going through similar journeys as well.
I think it probably goes back to my earlier comment and perhaps single tip around being able to speak others' language. I've had feedback in the past of, I know I've acted on it, sometimes I'm hearing you're talking, and apologies for other language speakers, you're talking Japanese, Jeff, and they're talking Chinese, and none of you know what you're talking about. So one of the benefits I've experienced is being able to understand and put myself in the seat of my colleague I might be talking to and try to talk their language, and equally encourage that to come back as well. And that's, generally speaking, where you get the best benefit, because certainly in my role, I'm often balancing a whole range of risk classes. And I may well be balancing somebody who's going, well, it's cyber that trumps this, or I might have the tension of compliance or privacy officers and technology or cyber or data as well. So, it does feel like I'm often constantly trying to balance a whole bunch of different views, and then importantly articulate them back so that people can go, okay, well, actually that's a risk that is within appetite and that one isn't, and it drives your decision-making process, which is key for me.
Thank you, Jeff.
It was a serious answer, wasn't it? Oh my gosh, I better sit down or lie down.
Yeah, my approach has always been walk a mile in their shoes, right? And I think a lot of the times we are busy, we have 500 million things that are on our mind, we have targets, and we forget the different businesses and what they're really there to achieve. And we just go in a session or a meeting with a stakeholder with a quite closed target and closed aims to get something out of that meeting and get an agreement, get a commitment from them without understanding where they come from. So, and I have had the privilege of working in lots of critical infrastructure, which have very specific requirements, have very complex business, and they are the one that actually running the business at the end of the day. So it's just really important to understand where they come from. So that's, and then by showing that, look, we're trying, I walked a mile, I understand where you're coming from, I talk your language, that takes a lot of barriers away.
Makes a lot of difference. Thank you, Miriam. Sure.
Yeah, I think I've had similar feedback to Jeff as well. Like, you're talking technology, you're talking these, terms, and the answer is, yeah, you have to be in their shoes and sit down and try and explain things. But there's also an element that, especially to the board and to the directors and to your peers as well, on the executive, that they need to sit down and actually understand what cybersecurity actually is about as well. So they need to understand what a SOC is, Security Operations Center, what is that made up of, what is it protecting, those sorts of things. But when you explain these things, you really need to explain it, how it impacts from their view coming in. So, if we get rid of information security altogether, or cybersecurity altogether, it's like having a house with no security guards out the front. That's really what it is. And you might as well leave all the doors unlocked and leave the keys on the floor. That's really what it's about, and you need to sit down and talk that in those terms.
Yeah, I think it's about. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Because like all of our boards are very diverse. They're very different backgrounds. They provide many specialised skills in different areas, and we need to respect that too. So.
Yeah. Very, very good. And it's about,
I might just add to that, and I think that's 100% right, and like articulating what it actually means. And another really good thing is or cheeky thing is that lots of, again, audience would know this is not new. Give them the options, like doing nothing, doing something, and doing this much. So it kind of makes them feel like they are actually making a decision when you actually already made that for them in the middle one. So.
Excellent, very, very good, helpful tips as well. But it's, at the end of the day, it's about taking time to understand the other person, right? What's in it for them? What is going to speak to them, and then finding out what it means to them as well, like why you're doing certain things, explaining it in very, very basic terms. Well, we just have a really short few minutes. We want to open it up to the floor as well. Take advantage of the CxO panel here. Any questions you might have? Now is your time. Nick is roaming around.
There's one question over there.
Oh, there's someone there. Okay. Very sharp eyes.
And I've got my glasses over there as well. So.
With the glaring light as well. Oh, good on you.
Thank you. My question is to Jeff. So as a CRO, when you provide recommendations to the business and business actually answers like, we are taking on actually a pragmatic approach. How do you respond to that?
Very carefully. So I think I heard the question right in terms of taking risk and taking a pragmatic approach. Look, there's nothing wrong with pragmatism. And I suppose as the risk node in the room, what I'm looking for is substance as well. And, we use the analogy, and I think we've used the term depth of defence, but I'm looking for depth So whilst you can be pragmatic, that's okay, but that doesn't mean, and certainly doesn't preclude me from being able to challenge. And, I'll probably make a pitch on behalf of all my fellow risk nerds, cut us some slack that our job is to challenge. And whilst you might go, oh, it's obvious or it's pragmatic, our job is actually to challenge and make sure that it is pragmatic, it is fit for purpose. But we also heard about, I'll accept the risk. Oh, will you? So again, part of my job is to check and challenge about, the risk that you're accepting, but also whether or not you fully understand the risk that you're accepting, which is where, pragmatism sometimes hides understanding, in my view. My personal view, again.
Thanks, Jeff. Last question. Going once. Oh, yes. Two hands. There's one behind you, Nick. Sorry.
You realise we can't see anything. Big light boy.
Yes, glaring.
As far as you can listen. My question is, let's imagine this is a scenario. You have a cybersecurity incident that you need to face. What's your strategy? Your CEO, it's Samuel, cannot attend, cannot talk to the media. For each one of you in your different organizations, how do you go about talking to the public?
Did you catch the question?
Could you repeat the question?
Can you repeat it? I'm trying to get it as well.
You are facing a cybersecurity incident at the moment.
Okay.
You need to face the media. Who do you send if your CEO is not available?
Okay, so there's a cyber incident, but you have to represent your company since the CEO is not available. What do you say? It's quite a
I would say
broad
media
question.
relationship, like normally the organizations, or at least bigger organizations, they have media spokesperson. That you're talking about media coverage and responding to, is that the question, Daniela? Yeah? Yeah, all right. So look, lots of organizations are training up their CISOs, CIOs, CTOs to also be able to be media trained. But I would say we are not there yet to be able to do that. And then also, like, it's very challenging, I think, experience to be able to talk. So my strategy, I would just send a spokesperson and I will brief them, obviously, train them what to say or like what are the questions that what's our response or what our status is, but I think that would be the best because they would know how, it's a journalism kind of talent that you have to have and be able to think of your feet and respond to different topics. So, yeah.
Yeah, the messaging and the tone, the approach, all has to be worked out beforehand, before the cyber crisis actually hits.
Yeah.
So that's why it's very important to make sure we have that as part of our BCP and be planning that and being prepared in advance way beforehand. So
Correct.
Yeah, very good question. All right. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of this segment. So a big thank you to our CxOs for being so brave to take the hot seats. And just a little bit of gift for you. You guys get something special. It's called the fair play, because you did well. So thank you for being part of SekuroKon'.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shamane.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's not mine. There.
Right. Who's got mine?